Welcome to the Go Flush Yourself podcast with Jared Kirk and Matt Milbauer. Welcome to another episode of Go Flush Yourself podcast. I'm Matt. I'm here with Jared. Today we have our first interview. We interviewed Todd Agnew of Craney Hill Kennels and spanieltraining.com. Had a really good conversation, Jared. I think you learned some things too. Yeah, so hopefully you enjoy this interview with Todd Agnew. All right, we have Todd Agnew here from Craney Hill Kennels. Todd, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your background with spaniels and dogs in general?
Well, not unusual, in this, business. We all probably started with dogs as kids and hunted and went through that route. Ran into other things in our lives for the most part, and then for those fortunate enough, we circle back to what we love doing, which is playing with dogs. I had a variety of different breeds growing up. I actually grew up with Chessies, as it turns out, hunting ducks out east, and then later on in life, I had a lab. When I got out of college and started to get back into the dogs. And I met some guys when I was hunting ducks on the Delaware River, and they had what turned out to be spaniels. I'd never seen one in my life, to be honest. And we're out there breaking ice, and I'm watching these little dogs, go off cliffs and break ice, and I just like, that's pretty cool. And, the dogs were just more exciting to me than the labs. As impressive as the labs can be at what they do, and I have great respect for that. Just the animation and the focus on people that the spaniels seem to have, it just kind of caught my eye. And then, one dog turned to 2 to 3, and of course, if you have 3, 4, 5, it's better. And watching your paying job, you might as well dive into a business that doesn't pay you, and but at least you get to do what you enjoy doing. So that's where we're at. We've run the whole gamut. We used to be, strictly gun dogs, and we ran our own dogs in trials, and then one thing leads to another, particularly if you start to have a little bit of success, you end up running more trials. And so these days, we do run, a bunch of dogs as trials, although all of our dogs hunt. We won't work with anybody that doesn't hunt their dog, just not of any interest to me. And, we do require that all of our dogs that we're running in trials do hunt, and that goes for the dogs that we won nationals with and High Point with, and, the dogs that haven't won anything, they all have to go out there and hunt and work for a living. And I just believe that the trials were set up in the beginning as a test of the best hunting dogs. And although, like all games, it becomes more specialized and you have to focus harder and harder on the game, to master and win at it, some of the hunting aspects are being lost, and I just kind of have a chip on my shoulder. I'm the heck with those people. I'll beat them anyway. I'm unwilling to give that up. I'm not going to give that up. So
that's cool. So you had, you mentioned you started with labs. That's similar for me too. Grew up with labs and ended up switching over to Springers somewhat recently. I've really enjoyed them. When it comes to trials and hunt tests, I'm familiar with how Springer ones work, just looking into it and learning about it. Haven't participated in one, but how is that different from the lab ones? Are you aware of kind of the differences there? I have this kind of working theory about when you see a pedigree for a spaniel, let's just say Springers, when you see FC on there or Master Hunter, that there's genetics there that are going to carry over into the hunting field, because I think the trials and tests for Springers, or spaniels in general, is very similar to what you expect from a dog in the hunting field versus a lab. It seems like maybe they're not as much. So when you see those titles on a Labrador, it's like they're good at retrieving, marking, and those kinds of things. But when it comes to the whole gamut of running for upland, is it different? Like, do you have an opinion or any thoughts on how those two are different when you're looking at those pedigrees of prospective litter between like Labradors or more retrievers versus spaniels?
Well, understand, I'm from New England, which means I have an opinion on everything. So, I think that, that's a broad brush on that topic. I think that in both the retriever game and the spaniel game, including hunt test, that, you know, those of us that play those games probably put more credence in those titles than are warranted. And, you know, we hide behind the aspect that, oh, it's about finding the best dogs for breeding. And although it does tend to show better attributes because what the expectation is for that dog, having obviously run lots of spaniel trials and, you know, hunt tests, although I haven't run a lot of those, I've seen a bunch of them, and there's a wide range of good and bad hunt tests. I am not a fan of the hunt test game. I really think that has become quite disappointing, more because of people not upholding a standard. But when it comes to the field trials with the spaniels, I think you may be over glorifying those titles. I can assure you, and I'll just speak for myself. I can assure you, I have titled dogs that I have no interest hunting with. And I can assure you, I've had wonderful hunting dogs that anybody would die for that have never gotten a ribbon. So I think, you know, spread it over 1,000 dogs with titles. There's probably some truth that the odds are in your favor. But understand this. The trial is a game. And if your dog is running for more than 3 or 4 minutes, you're probably out. Because that means something happened, and so you're out there, you know, you botched the retrieve, and you're trying to come up with this, the dog mismarked it, or can't find it, or whatever the case is. But, you know, it's a sprint. Well, I'm not sure that correlates to hunting very well. Okay. So a common thing that people will get is, you know, you've heard the term field trial washout. Well, dogs get washed out for lots of reasons, right? Not all of them good, not all of them bad. Some dogs just can't do field trials. But probably the biggest thing we hear about field trial washouts is when somebody buys them, usually, you know, someone tries to sell them to a hunter, is they get the dog and, oh, the dog runs, you know, like a lunatic for 5 minutes, and then he's done. Well, if all the dog does is run, you know, they're conditioning those dogs to run like that for, you know, find a bird, then, you know, the hunt's over. So, you know, the general public needs to recognize, give it time, you know, the dog will start to pace itself and hunt longer. But so just be careful. There's still no substitute for knowing the parents. Knowing the grandparents, regardless of titles. Okay.
So if I had, let's say, 2 springers, and one, and these are springers maybe you know, I'm trying to set an example here to make this make sense, and one you go, this is one I want to take on a field trial, and the other one you're like, no, I don't want to take this one on a field trial, but I love to take it hunting. What are the differences between those two that you're seeing, or that you know? Maybe if you know these dogs, and you're like, I'm taking this one hunting. This is my one that I'm currently touring on, trialing right now.
Okay, I had 2 dogs from the same litter. One dog we owned. Okay, the other dog was this dog Riot that we won the national with. Okay, from the same litter. Alder always had the worst nose in the kennel. Okay, that doesn't mean his nose was bad. It just means it was the worst in the kennel, right? There's always the fastest dog in the kennel. There's always the slowest. And there's always the best nose and the worst nose. But the dog was probably the best handling dog that I ever had. And when I say handling from a spaniel standpoint, it means with me in the field. I can pull the dog back, push him out. I can put him wherever I needed to. I don't mean handling like for a retrieve. Right? And so it's possible that the reason he was such a great handling dog is because subconsciously I never trusted his nose. So I spent so much time on that. So he almost never left a hole in the field, meaning a spot where he would have missed a bird because he didn't cover it enough with his nose, didn't get close enough type of thing.
Right.
So, you know, that dog as successful as he was at, he's titled in trial, he's, very nice dog. But
I think we lost Todd. Jared, are you there?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Oh, I think he dropped out. I can edit that back.
it's 42 yards to the left of that bush at the fourth piece of brome grass. I mean, like pinpoint nose. Okay. So there's two dogs, both successful at trials. Of course, all didn't win a national, but very, very nice. A dog, certainly an A dog. But I wouldn't want Alder for my hunting dog under any circumstance.
Okay.
Riot, who was a great trial dog, obviously, but he's probably the best hunting dog I ever worked with. And we didn't own him, somebody else did. But so that's probably the best example I can give you.
Okay, that makes sense. And you kind of cut out there in the middle, but I think we got the gist of what you're saying there. They just went for a few seconds, so it wasn't a big deal. So you were talking earlier about when you could handle the dog really well and you can make sure it covered all aspects of the field. I know it's really important, or I think it's really important. It's a lot of personal experience. We're definitely more hunters than trialers, but to cover all parts of the field. And that really comes down, from what I understand, to quartering. Am I read into that right? And if so, can you kind of talk about quartering and the importance of it, maybe in a field trial versus hunting, if they have any correlation or not?
Well, it should be the same, trial or hunting.
Mm-hmm.
But quartering generally is what is called when you're going into the wind.
Okay.
And if you think, a lot of times you'll hear them say it's a windshield wiper pattern, which means the dog goes, let's say, off to your left, goes up the field a little bit, then comes straight across in front of you, then off to the right, then up the field a little bit, and so forth as you go down through the cover. So quartering is a rudimentary back and forth. If you had a hunter on either side of you, they cover the ground so that those people get to hopefully shoot some birds. There are other aspects. Quartering is one way to cover the ground. Well, if the wind is different, that pattern, as we say, should look different. So hunters tend to be more free flow, free form, where the dog is, I don't want to say is running willy-nilly, but, it's not as systematic. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And hunters tend to allow that because, let's face it, they want to go hunt. They're not looking to, have everything picture perfect. And hunting is about putting birds in the bag. So a lot of times hunting dogs don't run like that. They run more for objectives. So in an extreme case, you're walking on the edge of a bean field that's been cut, and then there's a hedgerow to your right. Well, there isn't a dog in the world that wants to run out in the bean field. They want to go to the hedgerow because, history has taught them that's where the birds are.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So if you were running in a trial because it's a test, it's a game to show off, and they said the course was on the tree edge, well, they're likely going to have a gunner off in the bean field slightly, and your dog should cover somewhat in that bean field, depending on the wind, to show that, just because we know where they put birds, it's still supposed to be a show of training and, that mix of training and natural ability. So remember that even if you're hunting, though, your dog should run as efficiently as possible. So if your dog only goes in the hedgerow, let's say instead of a bean field, it's grasses. Okay, well, obviously it can be birds in those grasses because that's the transition zone right there before the hedgerow.
Mm-hmm.
So your dog should go out into those grasses some. Well, if the dog constantly is in the hedgerow, 2 and 3 times, and you got to call it out to get it over in the grasses, well, that becomes inefficient because the dog is routinely covering ground multiple times. And in practicality, you're going to be out of the dog twice as fast.
Right.
Okay, so quartering, and I think really probably what you're interested in is ground coverage, depending on the wind. The dog should do it as efficiently as possible. The hard part is define efficient. right? And this is where, from a trial standpoint, the judging gets a little bit convoluted because what's efficient for your dog may be inefficient for my dog or vice versa. What's your dog's nose compared to my dog's nose? What's your comfort with range compared to my comfort with range, right? So if you're not walking up birds, the dog doesn't get by them, and then you walk them up, so you're not passing birds, who's to say the dog hasn't covered that with their nose? It becomes subjective, but if you just think about it, maybe the easiest way to think about it is every time your dog went out to your left, instead of turning up the field, it turned back and came back behind you before it went to the right. That means when it went out to the left, it covered the ground. Then when it ran behind you, it covered that ground again. So that dog is covering the same ground twice on each cast.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And so therefore, your dog is running twice as much distance, but covering half as much ground. And so you're out of dog before a different dog, right? So in practicality, it's actually more important than in the trials.
Yeah, and if you only have one dog, it's way more important because you need that dog to last for your hunt.
Well, you just need more dogs. That's the easiest
So
way.
that's what there it is. Okay, I'm going to get that written. In writing, Todd.
A lot of this is subjective.
Sure.
And every time we get a call from the gun dog community, they're looking for a dog, it always leads with, I'm not looking for a field trial dog. Mm-hmm. Which, to be honest, is a mistake. The same way as any time a field trial dog doesn't make it, the field trial community says, oh, make a good gun dog, which is a mistake. Mm-hmm. It's like we've got two competing forces here where at one time it was the same thought process. But, it's like all walks in life. Things change and, as trialists, we're awful proud of ourselves. We seem to get lost in that quite a bit.
So, I have one more follow-up to that. Then, Gerald, I know you have some questions. But, so that, I would say quartering, for lack of a better term, maybe, but that pattern of a dog running back and forth in front of that windshield wiper pattern, do spaniels naturally do that at all? Because I asked that because my dog, I have a Springer, and she's, how old is she now, 2.5. And last season we were quail hunting along like a hedgerow kind of situation or a tree line situation and flushing quail. And when we walked back, I walked her out in the open grass, which I assumed there were no birds there, and there wasn't as far as we could tell. But she kind of started doing that windshield wiper pattern in front of me. Never seen her do it before. I've never really had her in a situation where it made sense for her to do it because we're always along a river or along cattails and stuff like that. And she started doing it. I thought maybe it's accidental. Maybe there is some genetics to it. Have you ever seen anything like that?
It varies. So we have some dogs that, take to it easier than others. I would say that, certainly the American breedings of Springer Spaniels as compared to the British breedings, probably take to it more than not. Okay. But, like everything, there's no absolutes.
Yeah. So, okay, one more follow-up then, because you said British breedings and American breedings. So I see sometimes you're looking at a pedigree, you'll see where maybe one of the parents or grandparents was imported, usually from the UK. And, some people will import a dog straight from the UK. Maybe that's if they're a breeder, they're trying to bring something different into their lines, I'm guessing, or maybe an individual wants a dog from the UK. I don't know. But what if I were looking, let's say I'm looking for a new Springer or a Cocker, do you have any idea what the differences would be if I got a generic well-bred dog from the United States versus a generic well-bred dog? I know that's a broad question, from the UK. Like, the hunting style is different. Is the testing different enough to where you're seeing differences in those dogs, or are they, if I was hunting with them, would it essentially be the same?
I think there is a difference for sure. Because, the type of hunting they do there versus what most of us do here. In the UK, there's almost no rough shooting. So there's almost no, let's go out and try to find some birds. You have to be ultra wealthy or know a gamekeeper, and the closest thing they have to that is, people may do some dog digging, which is generally they run the perimeter of the estates and try to flush the birds back on, to keep them on the estate property.
Right.
So the whole point over there is to work the birds to the gun, so it's generally driven shoots, and just try to send the birds out the opening over the hillside or something to where the guns are sitting there to shoot them. And then they'll have, retrievers or spaniel, but they'll have dogs down there picking up, right, making a retrieve. So, but the cover that they tend to be in, because it tends to hold the birds, generally is much more brutal than the game here. Okay, the cover here, very rarely do we get to run in really difficult cover, which, is a whole other issue. Mm-hmm. But, so over there, the dogs tend to have to run much tighter. Think of, rough grouse hunting.
Okay.
As opposed to big open prairie where the dogs should be running much bigger, right? I mean, they need to, or they'll never catch up to the birds. Mm-hmm. So the odds are you're going to get a dog that runs comfortably closer, right? Because they're going to breed the dogs that are successful. And so a dog that's constantly trying to stretch and get bigger and they're constantly having to correct, there's a very strong likelihood that dog's going to end up in the States because we can make use of that dog. Mm-hmm. The other thing, though, is you have to look at the health testing. The UK, as a general rule, is way behind us in testing their dogs. Mm. So in the States, you have an opportunity much easier to go see the parents' work, much easier to see that the health tests have been done, and if there's a problem, much easier to deal with who you bought the dog from. I mean, if you buy a dog from the UK, and I'm telling you all this on personal experience, if you buy a dog in the UK and there's an issue, you're stuck. I mean, you can't even return the puppy for your puppy fee because the cost to get the dog back there, plus the cost you spent to get the dog. I mean, it's just, there's no way you would do that. Mm-hmm. Okay? And there is no chance they are sending us their best dogs. Right? Sure. Why would they? I mean, there's no chance. So, I don't want to say I'm not a fan of the UK dogs. We've got a couple of dogs here from the UK, and we do some breedings with some dogs from the UK because I like to play. I don't have it all figured out. The genetics I have in the kennel, I don't think I've got anything on anybody. Right? I like what we have, but I like to play and try some different things, and you never know what you don't know. So I think there's some validity for those things, but I also think, enough marketing and magazine advertisements, also form opinions, right?
Yeah. Yep. For sure. Well, Jared has a new Springer puppy. It's his first Springer, and he's been dogless for a little bit here. He still gets birds though somehow. He goes out and still gets. We're up here in Eastern Washington, so bird numbers aren't as great as there are in other parts of the country. But Jared will go out without a dog and still get birds. But now he has a Springer puppy. I know he definitely has some questions kind of in that realm. I'm sure a lot of people run into when they get a new spaniel puppy they're hoping to hunt with.
Sure.
So like you said, I've mostly been dogless. I had a Chessie for a while, but he was not a hunting dog. He was one of the pet overpopulation dogs that I ended up getting. But anyway, now I actually have a legitimate. Yeah, he tried, but not a thing. I have a legitimate hunting dog now from an actual breeder, AKC registered, the whole nine. And he's sitting at 11 weeks right now, just doing kind of general puppy training stuff, doing a little, I don't know if it's you or Christina that's on Instagram, whatever like that, but I'm constantly
it would not be me.
Okay, it's Christina then. Okay.
Christina does all that. I mean, it doesn't mean I'm not on there, but it's only because she put me on there.
Fair enough.
You'll just have to be, if you're seeing something, you'll have to be clear what you're talking about because I have no clue.
Okay, so I post a bunch of videos on our page that's Bones, basically. That's my dog's name, doing some different stuff and stuff like that. I mean, she's the one that's reached out to me and asked me a couple questions of why I'm doing something. I think one video I had him on a check cord, just kind of running around free with it. And I'm assuming it was her, and she reached out and she's like, "Why is he on a check cord?" And I was like, to be honest, it made sense to me at the time, because he's a little puppy and I didn't want him to run away. Granted, he has not done any of that yet. He's still relatively young, so he relies on me for most everything. So she was like, "You should probably just take it off because it could have some negative connotations later on in life." I'm like, okay, well that makes sense. But I guess my main question is, he's like I said, he's sitting at 11 weeks. My plan, and you can tell me this is a horrible plan. Just straight up be honest with me.
Let's just hear a plan first. We'll worry about my reaction after.
Fair enough. So my plan is, he will be about almost 6 months during this hunting season. My expectations are very low this first year. I have almost zero expectations with him. It's just kind of getting him out right now. My plan was to go take a trip with Matt to Montana to go do some pheasants, and then bring my dog with me, bring Bones with me, just to get him into some bird contacts and stuff like that. We've been doing some retriever stuff. He's been retrieving, placeboard stuff, basically just all the basic stuff. I guess my main question is, do you think that's a horrible idea for me to take him on a trip this early into his life?
So I think the dog should go with you.
Okay.
What the dog does with you, then we probably are disconnected with that.
Okay.
So, listen, you guys, there's lots of ways to get this done. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Clearly, I don't have it figured out as the only way. But for us, we wouldn't run the chance of our 6-month-old puppy running into pheasants. Just that would never happen with us. Okay. And the way I try to view everything is, if it does and everything goes great, what did I gain? Well, if the dog gets a pheasant at 6 months or at 12 months or 18 months, I don't think it matters.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't gain anything that I couldn't get at 18 months, let's say.
Okay.
But there's a laundry list of bad things that could happen. Okay, so the bird could get up right under the dog's nose, scare the snot out of the dog, and now the dog has a bird problem.
Okay.
The bird could be wounded, right? Somebody came in there before you guys, shot a bird, they couldn't come up with the retrieve. Well, now your dog finds it, and now the bird spurs your puppy.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? And then the other piece is at 6 months of age, maybe he never finds any birds. Well, what the hell are we running out here for, from the dog's perspective?
Right.
Okay, so when the dogs are young, we want to control as many of the variables as possible.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Because I'm looking for that dog at age 3, not at 6 months, not at 12 months.
Okay.
Right. So, but I think the dog should go on the trip. I think the dog should be exposed to some different covers. I think the dog should get used to traveling, get used to hotel. All those other things that are important in that dog's life.
Mm-hmm.
I think getting on the road is good for that.
Okay.
Okay. The other thing is, you can't control gunfire.
Sure.
So, 6 months for us, our dogs would never be shot over at 6 months.
Okay.
Okay. Again, doesn't mean you can't. That's not how we do it.
Right.
Okay. It's just this dog is going to be with you for 10, 12, 14 years.
Right.
If we could convince people to just give up the first year and just keep the process moving forward, you stand a much greater chance of having 10 plus years of fun with that dog. If you rush it, in my mind, if you rush it, you maybe pick up one extra year, but that's also 1 year faster that dog chooses to stop listening to you, to start hunting for itself, to start realize, hey, thanks for the ride. Now I know what I'm doing. See ya. Okay, because at 6 months of age, our puppies would never be put under any pressure by that time. So that means all the obedience is all going to be clicker and treats, marker training for us, which means there's no consequences to the dog.
Sure.
if they don't obey.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I wouldn't want that dog to be out there running wild and not obeying, because let's face it, we're all going to say here at some point.
Mm-hmm.
And if the dog doesn't have the foundation and doesn't respond, the dog's starting to learn he doesn't have to respond, which
Okay.
will require that much more pressure down the road.
Okay.
So in the first 6 months, I mean, we're all marker training.
Uh-huh.
And to give you an example, our puppies now are, I don't know, they're 13 to 14 weeks, something like that. And so this morning when I worked them, all I did is they were on the table going back and forth, sitting, handing them treats. They came off the table, they're going in and out of the kennel. Then they were up on a place board, hopping up there. I'm walking around the board, having them turn their body to stay in the heeling position. What else? I did a little, here, all treats, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
I think, maybe a couple times they, had a dead pigeon thrown in the backyard. And when I say thrown, it was thrown 15 feet.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. They've had a tennis ball thrown, let's call it 15 to 25 feet on a few occasions. I'm just trying to expose the puppy. I'm not trying to train the puppy.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I want that dog, every time it comes out of the crate, I want that dog to say, man, Todd, I love you. What do you want to do?
Right.
Because I'm going to need that later on at a point in time when the dog comes out and says, Todd, I don't love you and I don't want to do what you want to do. But you know what? We put all this time in. I know what the expectation is, so I will do it.
Okay.
Okay? People don't do enough obedience.
Sure.
Almost
That's
all
true.
issues that everybody runs into, it's a lack of obedience. And when I say that, it's lack of obedience in a very high anxiety situation, which tends to be hunting or anything around birds.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
So, Jared, do you have a question based on that? 'Cause I had another one. But
I
a little
do.
off
So,
topic.
like, what?
Okay.
So for this, like, again, I'm coming at this from basically I've never owned a dog before kind of thing. So, like, for this year, would you even take him into the field at all to go hunt, or like with the expectations of like it's just more of like, I guess, a puppy walk with a gun, if that makes more sense.
So, as a general rule, we're probably not going to ever fire the gun or start our gun introduction until the dog is 9-10 months of age. Would be the earliest. Okay.
Okay.
Before we do gun introduction, that puppy is probably going to have flushed 100 to 200 birds. Okay, because we use Johnny houses, right? So the quail come back and we can keep releasing them and then go get puppies and go for puppy walks. No gun or anything. So they're learning to hunt.
Okay.
But we're just not shooting.
Okay.
And I don't know where in Eastern Washington you are, but I mean, man, when I was out there around Moses Lake, there was an ungodly amount of quail.
Well, we're close to Moses Lake.
Okay. Now, as I understand it, a lot of people out there think they're trash quail, and were they valley quail or something? And I think most people are like, they're not even any fun. Well, I'll tell you, for puppies, they're a lot of fun.
Yeah.
So, you could, to me, hunting is questing game.
Mm-hmm.
The gun is something for us. It's got nothing to do with the dog.
That's a good point.
So, I would hunt the dog as much as you can. It's just, I would be doing it without a gun. Because what you're looking for is, what we're always looking for is for the dog to tell us when it's ready for various things. So let's say, you said your puppy is about 11 weeks old.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you go and if you can, get it introduced to some birds, okay, so that a quail flush doesn't scare it, okay, or a chucker flush doesn't scare it. If you can do that, then once you start taking them out and going for walks, if you can run into some quail, then what I'm looking for is, what's the dog's attitude like? So it's a flushing dog, which means we can't have it chasing and running 400 yards away, because even if that didn't bother you, you could never shoot a bird.
Yeah.
So, my philosophy is more birds early on are better. And the old pointing dog people, the reason they went to the prairies is because they were birds. And they always said the good dogs would steady themselves. What they learned is there's no sense chasing. They can't ever catch the birds.
Mm-hmm.
So I believe that same thing. So I'm looking for the puppies that if they start to figure out, typically what happens is after a while they chase a little bit, but then they come back and start looking for another bird.
Mm-hmm.
But if you have one that just continues to chase and continues to chase, I would then back off how many birds that dog was getting, because the goal isn't to make the dog a rebel.
Mm-hmm.
The goal is to make the dog have bird drive and figure out scent and cover and all those various things. So we're looking for various stages, and when I think the dog has figured out hunting, from a puppy standpoint, then I'm going to move on and start to introduce the gun.
Okay.
Okay, but if the dog isn't aggressively hunting, I'm not introducing the gun.
That makes sense.
Because what difference does the gun make? If the dog won't hunt, what do I need the gun for?
That's the point.
Yeah, you're just introducing something that could cause a problem while you're doing it at that point. You need them to hunt first.
Yeah.
Right.
If the dog is aggressively hunting, he's probably never even going to hear the gun fired.
Right.
Right.
Okay.
Interesting.
Yeah.
All right, Matt, what was your follow-up question?
Oh, it was more of just a general question. So, Donald, if you had anything else around puppy stuff?
No, not really. I think I got a lot of stuff to think about now.
That's good. All right, Todd. So I have kind of one last question for you. Something I've been wondering. My two springers taught them how to hup using a place board, and they're both sleeping now, but I could say hup, and they're going to hup, and they're pretty good at it. They're probably not the best, but they're pretty good. We keep working on it. But when other people ask me who aren't familiar, like, why do you say hup? I go, that's just what you tell spaniels. I don't have a better answer. So what do you know about the origins or why we use hup for spaniels, but I don't see it in other breeds?
So as far as knowledge of the origins, what I've heard is that, back in the day, springers essentially were used to spring game into nets. Okay? That was a well-documented theory anyway. And so hup is like up. So there's some thought that, that's where it comes from. My own take on it is I think it's just a pompous springer people left over from back in the day.
That makes some sense.
And, like, as it turns out in the trials, I mean, it doesn't matter. It's just a word. So at the trials, if I didn't want to use hup, I could train all the dogs to just sit. It's just a word. Just like come or here, right? We use here.
Right.
Some people use it's just a word is all it is.
Right, just a command, and it's how you condition your dog with that command.
That's right. So I unfortunately, I don't have any true factual data.
I've been Google searching that. I think my mother-in-law is asking me, why do you keep saying hup? And I'm like, that's what you do. I don't know. And so I'm looking, what is this? There's nothing else.
Well, if it's on the internet, it's got to be true.
It has to be true. There's not even anything on the internet, I don't think. So
that's right. I mean, well, let me ask you: would you put anything on the internet that wasn't true? Would you waste your time putting fallacies up?
Oh, right, yeah, never.
You make a solid point there. Yeah. Well, I taught my dog sit, so if that makes you guys feel any better.
There you go.
I'm a firm believer. You do you, I'll do me. If you're happy with your dog, great. That's the whole reason to have dogs, right? I mean, it doesn't have to be my way. So
absolutely.
All right, Todd. Well, thank you for joining us for this chat. Learned a lot more than I thought I would learn. Really appreciate you coming on.
Yeah. It was a good discussion.
All right. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you for listening to Go Flush Yourself podcast. Check us out on Instagram and X As an ad-free show, we are completely listener-supported. If you would like to help us, please find us on Patreon for an easy $2 per month donation. We also have Go Flush Yourself merchandise available, including stickers. Check out the podcast description or the Patreon page for more information.